You're in the chat room with Virginia Trioli.
So with the Royal Commission, the final report from that Royal Commission into Victoria's mental health system, with that now finally tabled, the true horror and failings of the system can be read by every single Victorian, and I would urge you to take any time that you have available to read those reports. I'll be doing that immediately when I get off air this morning. What has that experience been like for Victorians who have gone through the system? We have a number of stories to share with you this morning. Hannah Friebel was forcibly treated in 2015. She didn't contribute to the Royal Commission, but she created her own way to respond to her experience. Hannah Friebel joins you now this morning. Hannah, good to talk to you in the chat room. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you doing?
Very, very well. When did you have your first experience of the mental health system here in Victoria?
My first episode was in 2015, and ever since then I have been determined never to go back into the public mental health system because it was that traumatising.
What happened? You say you had a first episode. What happened to you?
My first episode was of acute mental ill health, and it resulted in my hospitalisation for 2 months in the system, and it was an involuntary hospitalisation, and I felt as though my rights weren't upheld, and it was a stabilising place for sure, but by no means healing in any means.
Can you tell us what went on in there, Hannah?
I remember being admitted to an adult psychiatric unit at the age of nearly 18, and the amount of unsafety that I felt. My parents had to show up at every shift change, every 4 hours, to advocate for my treatment and my rights, and to make sure I was safe in this hospital. And I then got moved to a children's psychiatric unit, but it was it was a very tumultuous time, and ever since then I've been wanting to contribute to reform, and what we see today with the Royal Commission is a spark of hope for that.
Why did your parents have to be there every 4 hours? What was going on that they needed to be there to keep an eye on you and to advocate for you? From
my experience, I felt we witnessed lack of duty of care from the nurses. The nurses were, very busy with very little attention to, vulnerable patients. And my parents really had to show up for me. And without the support of my parents and my family during that time, I would have been lost between the cracks. And so, people with mental illness are vulnerable, and they deserve the highest quality of care, not merely, just scraping through, just surviving.
What do you remember about your treatment there, Hannah?
I remember there was a lot of medication used. I don't remember lots of it because of the way medication was used and the fact that I, couldn't remember. And I remember being forced into low stimulus and, feeling as though...
I'm sorry, I missed that, Hannah. Being forced into what?
Low stimulus. And no room for creative expression, no room for healing, no room for, hope or faith or even trust. There was a lot that was denied from me during my experience.
Is low stimulus the same as isolation?
Yes, I was isolated.
Okay.
I was actually put into a solitary confinement unit, not because I had done anything wrong or because I deserved that, but because it was unsafe. This was the safest place for me on the ward during, times when, there was violence. It's just a very broken system, and I am hopeful for a future of reform, but the way I've managed to find my healing has been telling my story through art and, finding the strength, finding ways to tell my story in a way that shows my strength and amplifies the voices of survivors of the system. And that's through a work called Sincerely Survivor at the moment. It's a dance film, and that was, in effect, my own informal submission to the Royal Commission. It was a way that I could tell my story in the modality of my choice that was most accessible to me. And, I really hope that we can see reforms.
We'll talk about that project in just a moment. Did you feel like you got in the end, either there or somewhere else, the treatment that you needed in order to get yourself well?
Yeah, so I think my healing began really when I was released into the community again, and I was able to return to my family and my community and find healing within the context of community and reconnection with community. And, we see mental health stigma is such a big issue in society, but, fighting against that stigma, I've really been able to find healing within the context of, loving arms of embrace and people that care and, do duty of care and do look out for me and, look out for each other. It's been a huge part of my recovery.
I think that's a really interesting observation. Hannah Friebel is with you this morning. She was forcibly treated in a public mental health institution in 2015, and she's speaking on the day that the final report from the Royal Commission into Victoria's mental health services has been tabled. It's an interesting observation you make about community because, and I'm glad that you did manage to find the connection to and healing within the community that worked for you, because as a community, it just seems to me that we have been quite deliberately disconnected from this. We haven't really wanted to play our role as community members or to see that it's our responsibility. There's some institutions out there to fix you up. There are some places you can go to. There's some drugs you can take. Go away and do that, and don't make yourself a problem for us, is the feeling that I've got from our community, Hannah.
Yeah, and I think for so long it's been someone else's problem. Mental illness is, always belonging to someone else. But I think through COVID, everyone's had some sort of first-hand experience with trauma or mental distress or mental ill health, and they've realised that actually this is not just someone else's problem, this is my problem too. And this is something we must fight together and we must, endure together within the arms of, empathy and compassion and community. And I think it's time that we start realising that this is something we must take responsibility for ourselves, and each one of us has the power to advocate for mental health in, our corner of the world. So, I'm really hopeful that, that there is a shift happening. What I've noticed as well, though, is that, as long as we're putting people out in the outskirts of community, in the psychiatric institutions, we have trust that they will take care of them. But, what if that trust is broken? Yeah. What do we do then?
Well, that will get us hopefully to some pretty solid recommendations out of the Royal Commission, particularly in relation to governance and oversight. Hannah Friebel is with you. Jen Rowan is joining us this morning as well, young person from Camperdown who started her own business in response to shortage of mental health services in the southwest Victoria. Jen, good to have you on board this morning. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks so much for having me.
What was your original experience of the system?
My experience is largely obviously based in rural and regional Victoria, and I've seen how there's so much stigma still attached to mental health, unfortunately. I've just seen, obviously shortage of services, wait times is astronomical, I'm hopeful that our new system will address these really unique needs that rural and regional young people have.
So what did you do in response to that?
I've worked with YACVIC, actually, the Youth Affairs Council of Victoria. We travelled all around Victoria. We engaged with about 418.
Jenny, are you there? No, there you go. You're just breaking up. Try again. Just say something, Jen.
Oh, sorry, can you still hear me?
I can hear you now. Go ahead.
Oh, good. Yeah, so I work with YACVIC, the Youth Affairs Council of Victoria. We travelled all around rural and regional Victoria to engage with about 400 young people with lived experience of mental illness. And we created this beautiful submission to the Royal Commission into Victoria's mental health system that listed about 49 recommendations. So that was in 2019. And then following that, I have also, started my own business. It's called Empowerful. And it's mental health first aid training based in southwest Victoria, but travel all around Victoria to deliver this great training.
What's first aid training in mental health look like?
It's essentially, we've all got our physical first aid training that we all do, and we all know Dr. ABCD. It's essentially that, but for mental health. So we also have a little acronym, ALGE, where we follow the actions through, ALGEE. We have a little mascot, which is super cute.
Talk us through what the actions are, ALGEE.
We've got approach the person, assess and assist with any crisis situation. We've got listen and communicate non-judgmentally. We've got give support and information. The first E is encourage the person to get appropriate professional help, and the last E is encourage other support, so friends and family.
Right, yeah. So in a sense, really what you're describing there is just, proper and compassionate connection.
Sorry, you were just cutting up a little bit there.
That's my turn now. You're encouraging serious and compassionate connection with people.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Hannah, how does that approach sound to you?
Yeah, I mean, it's consistent with everything that I'm on about nowadays. And I think care for the whole person, not just, one aspect of their life. Mental health treatment must be holistic and societal connection and compassion in community is a huge part of that. So, I'm with you.
I'm getting some extraordinary messages coming in on text and some calls that I'd really love to take. Hannah and Jenna, I hope you're happy to stay with me while we take some calls.
Yeah, sure.
But have a listen to this. This is not named, but on text. I'm sitting here crying listening to this. There's no real help. For 3 years living this hell. When you need help, all they do is call for a welfare check. The problem is I'm terrified by police. This has happened to me 3 times in the last 6 weeks. Is there any way of helping? I mean, that's the crisis place that you can get into, Hannah. What's the system that we need to have that can swiftly move to offer the support that this person needs?
Well, I mean, it starts with a question and it continues with inquiry. And I think, first of all, the mental health training that police have needs to be upped completely. I have firsthand witnessed the naivety of police when it comes to mental health and lack of duty of care and also the use of force to get someone to hospital or to forcibly get them into treatment. And that is not a human rights way of doing things. That's not a way to hold dignity of the individual. That's not a way to encourage them to seek support on their own terms and in their own way. And it's really a system of force is really not one that I would encourage. So
Sarah in Anglesea has called in. Hi, Sarah.
Hi. I just wanted to speak about an experience I've had being a youth worker working in Geelong. So I had been working with a young girl who was suicidal, who had just disclosed to me a pretty serious case of sexual assault, and trying to get into a counsellor in Geelong as an emergency, we couldn't do that. We went to the emergency department. I feel like there's a lack of maybe education around how serious these things can be with these emergency services. So I took it to the emergency department and they said to me, well, what do you want me to do? We'd been there a few times. My client would often try to commit suicide. And he said, oh, this is just another one of her, she's just being silly. What would you want me to do about it? And just not taking it seriously, really.
Oh, well, that's extraordinarily distressing. How's your client now, Sarah?
Well, I no longer work there. This is about a year ago.
Right.
But, we also often had to, police would be involved, members of, people from the community would call in about, my client. And also the police just had no time for it, also didn't understand that my client had a disability, that my client had some serious trauma. And I just always felt there was this lack of understanding and education from them.
Lack of understanding and education, and Jen Rowan also clearly an overworked and probably untrained workforce as well, that's not particularly trained in this sort of crisis treatment.
Yeah, absolutely. This is really distressing and unfortunately not uncommon. We know that mental health literacy needs to be raised, and we know that, unfortunately so many people in the workforce still need training, and it's just not happening because funding isn't there. And it's all about changing minds. It's changing mindsets, and yeah, it's really distressing what we're hearing, and unfortunately, quite common.
And also services being just by dint of fact that there's no other services to catch up this problem, other services then having to pick up the problem and to deal with the shortfall and turning themselves into immediate mental health crisis services, like for example, as we heard with that story, the person staffing the desk there in the emergency department at the hospital, when that's not their particular skill set. Hannah, I know that your response to this situation has been a much more personal and creative one, and you mentioned the dance project before that you embarked on as well. What use do you believe that can be to other people who might find themselves in a similar situation to you that you did several years ago?
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, my journey through telling us my story in the creative modality of my choice has been about, embracing other, therapeutic ventures. The medical model has its purpose and it serves for a purpose and a time, but we must look outside of the medical model if we're going to see, a future of inclusion. And so for me, this journey has been about peer support. It's been about artistic expression. It's also been about spiritual care as well, and, nourishing the human spirit. How do we care for the soul, when someone is in this deep crisis? How do we support them through this, breaking through journey and breaking down and breaking through? So, Sincerely Survivor has been like I've held up a mirror to my face, and now I'm seeking to turn that mirror around and offer it to other survivors and invite them on a journey of healing that is through storytelling and peer support and artistic expression. And, it's been, it's actually been so powerful for me in my journey. And, to the point where I can sit on radio and I can tell my story and with my full name, and I'm totally confident in that. And
that's a hell of an achievement after everything you've been through.
It's big. It's big.
Hannah, great to talk to you this morning. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Jen Rowan, great to talk to you as well, and thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
No doubt after spooling through all the pages of this Royal Commission report, we'll have a reason to talk again.